Today, I'm going to be telling you the best champions to play for each rank in solo queue. But on top of that, I'll also break down the champions that are guaranteed to keep you hard stuck for a very long time. After coaching hundreds of players across all ranks, Iron through to Challenger, I've locked in the best champions that I see climb successfully, but also the champions that really seem to struggle. So let's get started. First up, we have Iron plus Bronze. Now, there are two main things that make champions very effective in the skill bracket. The first one is, of course, ease of execution. It is so important that we accept reality here. If you're playing in Iron or Bronze, there is so much about the game that you don't know and cannot execute, so why would you want to practice it on a champion that's going to take you 500 games to play as well as that 50-game Garen player? Why don't you think about it like this? If you were teaching your son how to drive for the first time, would you want them to drive my brand new Lambo that's in the shop, I swear at the moment, or a second-hand car? Of course, you want them to use the second-hand car until they get more confident or driving something with a bit more power. The same thing applies to League. Learn the game with an easy to execute champion, get a few wins under your belt, and then come back to a harder champion when you have a strong foundation. The second thing here is strong side laning. There is so much resources up for grabs. The junglers don't kill camps properly, people don't answer waves well, people aren't good at ganking sides, they just sort of run around not knowing what to do. If you're playing a champion that can devour farm, devour camps, devour tower plates, you can make yourself very, very strong, which is a very effective way to win games in the skill bracket here. So you can see by the top row, all of these champions are very easy to execute. A lot of them are very strong in side lane, and even a champion like Kale, which you wouldn't call a strong side laner, quote unquote, but they can power farm all the waves, all the camps, and come back later on in the game to carry. So it's a different type of side lane strength there. So these champions are definitely the best. If you can play one of them, build a strong foundation, maybe unlock the gold champions later on in this video, then you'll be in a good position. Now, in terms of our underrated options, we have my personal favorite Olaf on top of Warwick, Volibear, Teemo, and Sahir. So these champions are kind of similar. They do have ease of execution. They do have strong side landing, but they're just not as easy to execute as the champions above them. You will need to get a couple hundred games in, maybe between 100 and 200, not too much, to build a strong foundation on them and learn how to win games on them. But for the players that don't enjoy the super simple champions like Garen or Mordekaiser, then these champs will be a really good option for you. Now we can see here the overrated trap cards. So these are champions that I see really commonly in Iron and Bronze that people usually think are good in these ranks, but I actually disagree. In my opinion, Jax and Darius are way harder than they seem. If you're playing Darius as a blind pick in Iron or Bronze, not only are you going to struggle into champs like Teemo, but the main problem is you don't really know how to win a game. Winning a game with a lead on Darius is actually pretty hard. You can't side lane, it's hard to split push. If you get ganked inside and lose your sums, it's really bad for the game. Your team fighting is more front to back, so there's a lot of rules on Darius that are kind of hard to learn for a new player. So champs like him are just really, really hard. Even though they seem like a good, lane stomping champion in Iron or Bronze, you're always going to get outperformed in the mid game by the set, by the Mordekaiser, because their game plan is a lot easier. Jax, it's just really difficult to learn the matchups on. Jax vs Malphite, Jax vs Teemo, Jax vs Garen. There's so many matchups that are easier for them to play than you. You're really going to struggle on him. And then champions like Yorick and champions like Mundo. Yorick, I just don't think strong enough in lane to be worthwhile to play him here. Champions that can get early game solo kills, like Set, like Garen level 6, like Olaf, are always going to outperform. And the thing I like about the champions above that can side lane, they can also team fight as well, where Yorick can't really do that. And for Mundo, the reason why I think he's a trap card, even though yes, short term you can cheese some wins on him, if somebody got to, let's say, gold 4 playing Mundo, they're going to be much, much worse at laning phase than a gold Garen or a gold Kayle even, because you don't really need to play lane on Mundo. You can just farm with cleavers from far away, and yes, there's little tricks you can do, and if you win lane on Mundo, it's great, but at the end of the day, you are just farming until Warmogs. You can't pressure 1 to 5 at all, so this champion, I think, is good short term, but really bad long term. That's why I'd call him a trap card. And then a bruiser like Renekton, you win purely through team fighting, not a good side laner, so I'm just not a big fan of champs that feel a bit pressured to drive the bus and speed up the game. Games last so long in these brackets here. Now, for don't do it, I think it's pretty straightforward. These champions will take even a diamond or an emerald player more than 500 games to do well on. An emerald player trying to get to master with Riven, I would say would take at least 500 games. So if they already have that emerald foundation of lane assignments, trading, wave control, all of that stuff that you don't have currently in Iron or Bronze, then how are you going to learn that on top of a champion as complicated as Riven? So again, don't let me be the party pooper. If you really want to play them, you can, but just keep in mind it's going to take you maybe 10 times longer to get to a certain rank as a Garen or even as an Olaf, the champions above them on this list here. Moving on to silver plus gold, and there are also some really important things I value in champions in these ranks. The first one is clear reference points. So these are essentially guidelines you can follow flow on your champion, kind of like a game plan that works most of the time. League has a lot of variables, so if you can cut that down, it makes it very, very easy for you. So to give an example, a reference point for Kale, if you can get to level 6 Swifty boots without being behind, and then play aggressive on your range form, and in the mid game, 0 deaths, high CS front to back team fighting, if you did that successfully every game, you will probably win 60 or 70% of your games from that alone. So this is an example of a champion with very clear reference points. The next thing here is a low skill floor, high skill ceiling. So a champion like Urgod or a champion like Darius are relatively easy to play at the beginning, but you can get extremely good at them compared to a champion like Mordekaiser, who in my opinion has a low skill ceiling. The next thing here is laning power or scaling. So either they have one really high like Kayle scaling or Warwick laning power, or a mixture of both like Darius or Garen. That's really, really ideal for this rank here. Now, underrated options you can see: Olaf, Zahin, Singe, Teemo, and Chog. So a lot of these champions have pretty good laning power. Olaf, Teemo, or pretty good scaling here, like Zahin, or they're just champions where if you wanted to be an OTP like a Singe, you can get really rewarded. Singe, really easy, 10 tests per minute, impact the map. Yes, you do kind of need to commit to being a Singe player long term, but I think this champ is super underrated, which is why I have him in this category. Really, really high impact, and a Singe in most brackets actually has a really high win rate, normally top 5 every patch. For that reason, the champion is just really good. It's just so unique that only one tricks really play him. Now, overrated trap cards. So Alawi, Mundo, Nasus, Yorick, and Gwen here. So the reason why I think these champs are traps, first of all, they can't really team fight well, most of them, apart from Gwen, where again, I still think gold and below, getting extremely fit from side lane and then using that strength to carry team fights is the way to go. Or champions like Gwen, where you need to execute quite well. You need to play your range advantage, you need to space people. I would always put my money on the Garen, on the set, on the Mordekaiser, playing against the Gwen matchup, even though at the top level, Gwen would be perfectly fine. She just doesn't have that ease of execution. I just think overall, as a blind into the champs you're versing, so all those juggernauts I mentioned, on top of Darius, on top of Teemo, even Kayle, more or less. I just don't think Gwen is really going to have a higher win rate into those champions compared to, in silver and gold. Now, don't do it. So these are champions, please don't do it. Way too hard to execute, and even if you execute them well, let's say you're a platinum level player in gold, like your skill level is really high, and you're a platinum level Cassante player, I would still put money on the gold Garen player, because the champion, the way it wins games, the way you can play side lane, this functions way better. Why would you want to play a peel tank in silver for your silver Ashe who's probably building the wrong items? You want to play champion that can win through side or scale relatively well here. And then on top of that, just champions that are too hard to execute. You're not going to play Rumble well, you're not going to play Aurelia well without at least 500 to 1,000 games. And even though you're non-iron and bronze, it might even be high gold. Still, there's so much about the game that I want you to learn before you try to play a champion that's just built for making montages, or a champion that's built purely for high elo like a Rumble. Next, we have our Platinum plus Emerald tier list, and I do have quite a few things that I value for champions in these ranks. The first one is, of course, low skill floor, high skill ceiling. The reality is it's going to take you longer to climb from Emerald to Diamond on average than it would be from Bronze to Silver. So I want you to get that return of investment if you're playing hundreds of games on your champion. And then later on, if you're climbing from Emerald to Diamond, you're probably going to push to Master. And I don't want you to be stuck on something like Set or Mordekaiser that won't function well in those games. The next one here is consistent value. And what that means is if you play 100 games in a row of one of these champions on the top row, in Platinum lobbies, in Emerald lobbies, you'll get a consistent value in return. It's not going to be some games really useful and some games terrible like a Yasuo would be. But you might be thinking, Darius and Olaf, they're not really consistent. What if I verse a range comp and stuff like that? And the champions you verse in these games on average, the high pick rate champions, Olaf and Darius typically likes. And even if you do verse something cringe like a Vayne, which both of them hate, a Platinum Vayne, you're going to be able to run her into the dirt if you have good champ mastery. And then with Kayle and Singe and Urgot here, it goes without saying, if you have good farm, if you know your champ's reference points, if you execute your game plan, your value will be very consistent. Now, meta resistant. So this is something I do value for these champions, where I don't want you to be really good at Darius and then next year he's terrible. Most of these champions in Platinum and Emerald specifically are usually A or S tier. There might be the odd meta where they're a bit worse, but in recent patches, especially the past 2 or 3 years, these champions have always been relatively good in those ranks there. Now, the last one is just carry potential. I don't really want you to be playing a champion like Sion, who has a low skill floor, pretty high ceiling, consistent value, that type of thing, but pretty low carry potential, so I value these champions a bit higher. Now, underrated options. So the reason they're low is they don't really meet all the criteria. So Ornn doesn't really have good carry potential, but the rest of the things he does. Champion like Kled, I think his skill floor is not that low. So you can kind of see they're missing in some elements here. Shen, lower carry potential. And you might be thinking, who's underrating Shen? Me. I'm the biggest Shen underrated, as you guys will probably know if you've watched my channel for a bit. But I do think in Platinum and Emerald, this champion that can do pretty well. You can get a lot of 1-5 solo kills. I see a lot of students just throw their lane 1-5 into a Shen. Even though at level 6 you can start to win. Ignite Shen, especially with the Dusk and Dawn Titanic Hydro type build, you can start to bash people's heads in. So I think that champion can do quite well. Now for the trap card. So either too hard to execute, like a Fiora, like a Yasuo, and low consistent value. If you play Yasuo versus Set or Renekton or even champion like Garen or Mordekaiser, I'm going to put my money on them. I'm sorry, just that ease of execution is going to be really hard for you, or just low carry potential like a Scion here. And then down below, don't do it. Most of these champions, the top 3 especially, are mainly only good Master Plus, so stay away from them. I think Ambessa's win rate is like dreadful below Master. Definitely stay away from her. And then champs like Varus, who are not really meta resistant. They're too easily gankable, and just Tarm is just a useless sack of shit, so I don't really want you to play him either. Moving on to our Diamond plus Masters tier list, and there are 3 main things you want to keep in mind when picking a champion for these ranks. The first one is high skill ceiling. If you're climbing from Diamond to Master or Masters Plus, you don't want a champion with a low ceiling, like I said, or a Mordekaiser. You want to be rewarded for the high amounts of effort you put in, and usually champions with high ceiling have more options in the game as well, which is important the higher rank you go. The next one is carry potential. You still climbing through Diamond, climbing through Masters, don't want to be stuck on Cho'Gath, hoping your team does well. You want to play a champion that can get stuff done, carry, and if they can scale well, that's even better. Next one is blind pick ability. Now this one is lowest on the list for a reason. You don't need to have your 10 out of 10 blind pick like a Rumble or a Jace, but you do need to play a champion that if you blind pick them in Masters and you have really high mastery, you can do relatively well. So you might be thinking about champs like Riven, champs like Jax that do have hard matchups, but if you play a lot of the champion and you truly understand your matchup spread, you can get away with it, and then the carry potential and high skill ceiling that you're going to get rewarded for by putting time into these champions will outweigh that blind pick ability, but they're not such bad blind picks that you can't make them work. So these champions, these are definitely the top 5, I would say. You might be surprised to see some like Gangplank, like Quinn. I think these champions are underrated, but because they're the best picks, I'm going to put them on the top of the list here. So again, they just hit the criteria, and if you have high mastery, you can blind pick them. All 5 of these champions have one tricks get challenger every single season. These are champions that are always good in the meta as well. Maybe not always good, but one tricks can always get challenger on them. They always seem to find a way. So these are champions where if you play them well, it doesn't matter the meta, you can have success there. Now, underrated options. So Camille's definitely the most underrated here. I think Camille struggles in Grandmaster and Challenger. And below Platinum, you're going to get outperformed by the ease of execution of like a Mordekaiser or like a Set or Renekton, right? But I still think she's really good. She has high carry potential. The players you're versing aren't going to be insane on Jace and on Rumble and champs that make Camille very sad. So I would just say Camille is an underrated pick here. Champs like Singe, like Zac, really rewarded if you have high mastery here. Same with Warwick there. And then Fiora, of course, got that carry potential, high skill ceiling. I just think the reason she's lower is that blind pick ability is not quite as good. I don't think she's as meta resistant as other champions, but definitely a great pick as well. That's why I've got her as underrated. Now, overrated trap cards. Again, Ambessa, terrible win rate below Masters. She's very fun to play in, and Ambessa can trick you. It can feel like you're doing good on Ambessa because you're winning lane, but trust me, the champion is so strong in lane. There's a big difference between winning lane and using this champion's power to its full potential. If you're playing in Diamond or Master, you're not using this champion to its potential, I can guarantee you. Now, for Gnar and Vayne, these champions just, Gnar doesn't really have high carry potential. He's like so stable. I'd call him the perfect 5 out of 5 in terms of stability. You're not going to be the lose condition. You're not going to be the win condition that much. I just think this champion doesn't have enough oomph, not enough firepower to make him worth being a main pick here. And then for Vayne, pretty much counter pick only. Maining Vayne, I think it's just not worth it here. And there's some metas where she's terrible, even though she's good right now. And then Ornn, just that carry potential is missing. And Set, Master plus Set is just miserable. Trust me, you're going to miss a Nivea and Vayne and Aurora every single game. Not going to be very fun. Now, for don't do it, you might be thinking about Master Plus, haven't I unlocked Rumble or Cassante yet? No, unfortunately, you have not. Check out Cassante's win rate in Diamond. It's the lowest win rate top in the game. This patch, right? It's craziness to me. So this champion just a pure tank that is so hard to execute. In my opinion, from playing Korean solo queue for a while now in high ranks, when I'm playing on my Masters account, Cassante and Rumble is relatively easy, but in GM and Chell lobbies, they are very, very hard. You need to be executing these champions to a GM or Chell level for it to be worth it, in my opinion. And then other champions like Mordekaiser, you're just going to get wrecked. Your champion's too easy to outplay in. And then Varus and Akali, they're just not consistent as blind picks and as counter picks. I think even though Varus isn't super difficult, playing him, min-maxing your lane without dying to a million ganks is hard. And then Akali, too hard of a matchup spread here. And finally, we have our Grandmaster plus Challenger tier list, which I'm guessing most of you skipped to in the video because you're all just that good. So there are three main things that I really value for champions in the top level of the game. Consistency. So a champion like Jace, I'm going to use as a perfect example. If you play Jace to a Challenger level 100 games in a row, he is going to be consistently useful. He's going to be between a 7 and a 9 out of 10 every single game that you play. Where a champion, let's just use Yone as an example, you might have a complete pop-off 1v9, Aurelia is a better example, complete pop-off 1v9, 10 out of 10 performance, and then another game, you might be a 2 out of 10, right? Champions like that aren't really that valuable in GM and Chal, as there's just too much variance against high skill players that won't let you snowball very often and will counterpick you quite well. The next thing here is skill ceiling. So again, if you're playing in Challenger, you need a champion with a high ceiling, and if you're in Challenger, you are getting close to that ceiling. You could imagine somebody who, a really good example is to use Viper, right? Let's say from NA standards, he is a 100 out of 100 best player on that server. If he's a 100 score on Riven, he can get rank 1, 2, 3. If he's a 100 score on Mordekaiser, he cannot, even though total, if we could measure his skill, hook it up to a machine, solo leveling style, he would be the same skilled player. Because his champion ceiling is so low on Mordekaiser compared to Riven, he wouldn't be able to have such good results. So skill ceiling, just so important. You want to play a champion that you get really rewarded, because especially playing in GM and Chal against good players, you level up a lot each game. So if your champion gets value from that XP, you'll be in a great position. And finally, we have blind pick power, which is similar to consistency, but I mean more so for lane. So blind pick power, Rumble, Jace, GP, they're all really, really good blind picks. Yes, I would say Riven is a little bit worse of a blind pick than others, but the carry potential is higher, so it kind of balances out in a way. Skill ceiling might be a little bit higher too. So you can see these champions are just all across the board really good at these three categories. Now, the next thing here is underrated options. So these are champions that I still think are good in GM and Chal, and people are fading away. I don't want to play Jackson, Darius into range. Look how well rated it on the career server versus people with insane spacing, because he also has great movement. And Jackson's plenty of Challenger Jacksons in career as well. These champions are still underrated options, not quite as good because lower consistency and lower skill ceiling, but still great options nonetheless. Now, Sion, I actually think is underrated. I like Sion in GM and Chal. I hate Sion in Master, because your teammates are going to be better, and that blind pick power and consistency is so high on this champion. I actually really like him here, and skill ceiling is higher than you think. You can be really good at spacing, and if you do that on Sion, you'll be heavily rewarded. This champion is sleeper, really good at laning, if you have insane spacing. Cassiopeia, this is one of the best top lane champs in the game every year, in my opinion. I always put her A tier for a reason, but only like 4 people in the world can play her that well, so that's why she's underrated. And Yorick, so the reason I have him here is in a champ pool, right? So if you're a GM and Chal, chances are you're not always going to be a one trick. I think more top laners in GM Chal have champ pools compared to OTPs, right? So Yorick, in these games where you're going to verse a lot of Jace, a lot of Rumble, a lot of Vayne, Aurora, all the stuff we love versing, Yorick has a lot of value currently. Now, trap cards. So overrated trap cards. Garen, Kayle, Yone, Aatrox, and Shen. So either these champions just don't have high enough skill ceilings and high enough kind of agency on their champion, like a Garen or an Aatrox, or too many hard matchups to make them work, or they're just too weak early game, like a Kayle that will just get obliterated in lane. If you blind pick Kayle and versus Irelia or Jax and Challenger and their jungler is good, you're going to get dove 5,000 times, and chances are if their jungler is Challenger, he's going to be pretty good there. And then champs like Yone and Shen, just not good enough stable blind picks. It's not really worth playing them in these games here, but I still see the pick rates are relatively high most of the time. Now, don't do it. So these 5 champions, the skill ceiling is just too low. You could be a really, really good set, and a slightly worse player than you playing it like a Aurora is going to completely destroy you, as long as the skill gap's not that big, right? I always say, you can get really good at punishing the spacing minigame. If you are a silver set versus a silver Teemo, I guarantee you right now I could lean back in my tier 1 hand and kill them just with movement, right? And of course, it's not a good example, Challenger playing in silver, but from my experience coaching, if a silver player develops their spacing, they can also kill the range champ too. But if you're versing a Challenger Vayne, you're not going to close the gap very easily on set. You can do it sometimes, that's why some set players do pop into GM, sometimes they even pop into Chal for a little bit, but it is just not worth it, I would say. Same thing applies to all these champions. The matchups you're going to verse are way too brutal. The champions are too easy to play around in lane, too easy to play around in the mid game. Your options are just too limited. You want to play champions with high skill ceilings and champions that have a lot of options, and usually it's a correlation, right? A champion with a really high ceiling will have more options in the game compared to a champion like Tom with that low ceiling. So one more thing I didn't really touch on that you might be curious about, what about, strength in the meta every single season, right? So for example, a champion like like Darius is kind of an A tier champ every year, but Jace has been S tier for a while now. But if you remember, like 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, before people took grasp on him, he had a tough time, right? So there might be let's say they remove range grasp or something like that, and Jace's priority went down a little bit. I would just update the tier list because meta is so important in Grandmaster and Challenger. That's reality here. I can't value power every single year. It's not fair for this list because a lot of people play the meta. A lot of people are good at the meta. So for Silver, you could pretty much always play Garen every year. For Challenger, you probably can't get away with playing Rumble every year. There's going to be years where he's not good, right? There are exceptions like Riven. You can play her every year, of course, like Gangplank as well. I mean, there was the year where he had no Essence Reaver. I think he got a lot worse when Essence Reaver didn't have Sheen. So he's a bad example, but Riven is one you can kind of get away with. But most of the champions in a GM or Challenger tier list should be updated depending on the meta, because meta is just the most important there. Alright team, let's wrap that up for today. I'm hoping you walk away from this with a new main champion under your belt. But if you have any questions at all, since I only mentioned about 20 champions in each rank, let me know in the comments below the champ you like to play, the rank you're in if I didn't touch on it, and I'll let you know my stance. I'll try my best to get back to you, and I'll see you all for the next one.